Armchair Explorer is a part of the Voyescape podcast network. Check out all of their shows from around the world at voyescape.com. This episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know, we've all got that one friend, haven't we? That one who finds all the best travel deals, picks the right cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach. Well, now you can be that friend because Smart Travel is like him or her, but in podcast form. They cover all things travel finance, like how to get real value from points, not just a tiny little reward at the end of checkout, or which flight deals are actually deals and not just clickbait, or when that convenient travel bundle might actually be a hidden tax in disguise, all that stuff. So travel smarter and spend less with help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. Hey guys, welcome to Armchair Explorer. My name's Aaron Miller. I'm a travel writer and your host. And today I'm excited to share an episode of a podcast that I've been really impressed with. It's called Going Wild with Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant. It's chart-topping, it's Webby Award-winning, and it's made by our friends at Nature on PBS, so you know it's good. They do a great job over there. Anyway, Going Wild's back for a brand new season. It features some of the coolest champions of nature. I love some of the ideas for stories they have. A former butterfly technician who saved an endangered species while incarcerated. Yup. A marine ecologist who worked as a featured diver in the documentary Enslaved with Samuel L. Jackson. Lots of cool, interesting stuff like that. Each episode explores what led these people to create change within themselves, their community, and the natural world. So I thought it'd be a really good fit for the kind of stories we do, and I hope the kind of stories that you guys like too. In today's episode, you're going to hear from Nat Geo Explorer / stand-up comic. What a great combination that is, by the way, for a presenter, for anyone. Her name is Ella Al-Shamahi. We're going to hear about her research in places where people don't normally do science, particularly conflict zones. And it's really interesting because if you think about it, there's so many untapped places that we haven't even begun to research yet, simply because it's not safe or it's hard to get permits to go and work there. So if you do like today's episode, be sure to follow Going Wild with Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, whatever you're listening to right now. I'm going to stick that link in the show notes too. So without further ado, let's get into the episode.
If you're looking for scientific discoveries, you go to places where barely anyone's looking. Somebody described it to me once as like the most alien-looking place on Earth. So it has like these incredible canyons, and then it has these like beaches that have sand dunes on them. So many of the plants there, the animals there are endemic, so they exist there and only there.
I'm Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant, and this is a different kind of nature show, a podcast about the human drama of saving animals. This season, we're talking to all kinds of nature advocates, from a paleoanthropologist who hunts fossils in conflict zones to someone who helped save an endangered species while in prison. We're going to hear from real-life heroes with widely different expertise and life experiences about what led them to be champions for the natural world. What transformation did they go through to create change within themselves, their community, and the world? Together, we'll find out how these ordinary people fell in love with nature and became their most extraordinary selves. This is Going Wild. In this episode, I'm talking to my longtime friend, Ella Al-Shamahi. Ella is a paleoanthropologist and evolutionary biologist who specializes in studying Neanderthals. She's also a television host for nature and historical documentaries. As a paleoanthropologist, Ella explores caves in unstable and hostile territories in search of fossils to uncover the overlooked stories of human evolution. Her work has taken her to places like Iraq, Somaliland, and her ancestral home of Yemen. Hi, friend.
Hello, how's it going?
Oh my gosh. Listen, you're a hero of mine for so many reasons.
That's ridiculous. She shuffles in her seat and is wondering if Rae's like sound of mind. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I love this In our conversation today, we'll dive into the transformation that Ella had to go through to become the scientist that she is today, and how the shifting of perspective has been the through line of her life and career, whether it's her adopting a new way to look at the world or using her work to inspire a shift in the world's perspective on people and places that are often dismissed or misunderstood. Born in the United Kingdom to Yemeni parents, Ella grew up in a Muslim community in Birmingham. Throughout her childhood and adolescence, Ella adopted the creationist beliefs of her community, believing that life on Earth was created by a divine being, like a god, rather than gradually changing over time through natural processes, like evolution. Okay, so let's jump in. Can you talk about your journey and your upbringing as a creationist, like believing in creationism? And then how did you transform into someone who doesn't just believe in evolution, but is an expert in it?
The truth is, most people have the beliefs and opinions that they do just because that's the community they were raised in. It's just really that simple. It just happens to be their tribe because of an accident of genetics, basically. For me, I really didn't believe in evolution, and I was going to university to destroy it. I'm just apparently that arrogant.
As a curious teenager who loved history, philosophy, and pondering life's big questions, Ella was very intrigued by the theory of evolution. Even though at the time she believed the theory to be wrong, she still had so many questions about it.
I was kind of already going through the texts across many religions, actually, that were critiquing of evolution. And certainly by the age of 17, I had said, okay, some of this is just, they really don't know their stuff. And part of the reason for me going to university was so that I could really understand it. And ironically, my dad, he's an immigrant, so he put a lot of pressure on me to actually go into the sciences. And I would be lying if I said that he didn't influence me in that. But I kind of found my little in because I was really into philosophy and the humanities and blah, blah, blah. Of course, it kind of made sense that if I was going to go into the sciences, it would be to kind of like try and take apart this theory that's been causing us so many headaches, you know? It was fascinating to kind of go study this subject that you don't believe in. It was like, oh, okay, this is the strength of this subject. Okay, might this be a weakness? Okay, let's look at this a little bit. And it was that kind of thing.
Do you remember the first time that it hit you, like the class or the professor or the textbook, where you're kind of like, I
think one of the first realizations, which came quite early on, I realized that my professors weren't lying to me. If evolution is incorrect, as I believed it was, it's not because there's some kind of a conspiracy. They might conceivably just have the data wrong and they might be quite arrogant about it. But these guys clearly believe in this. And then eventually I realized it was just too solid a theory. Obviously became an evolutionary biologist and now kind of like travel the world doing human evolution. So that was quite a full circle, I guess.
Ella came from a Muslim heritage, and even though she changed her mind about the theory of evolution, and now she's a scientist who studies evolution, it's clear that for Ella, those two things are not at odds with each other. To her, science and religion, whether it's Islam, Christianity, Judaism, are not mutually exclusive.
I would say that Islam is very similar to Christianity in the sense that there are so many different schools of thought. Right? So the community that I came from, certainly, when I was younger, didn't believe in evolution. If you go and speak to that same community now, I think as they've been exposed to more science, many people have kind of changed their opinions or are much more open to stuff. There is a lot of diversity of opinion about the science. And I think that's probably really, really good because the best people to convince their own communities about the validity of, for example, evolution or climate change or vaccines are actually people that are within those communities. We do really, really need to not exclude people just because, you know, they come from communities which we associate with being against the science, because it's like, actually, those are the communities we need to kind of really focus on.
This commitment to ensuring that certain groups of people are not excluded from science is something that becomes a central theme throughout Ella's career as a scientist. So you're the first paleoanthropologist we've ever had on the podcast. Can you just explain what in the world does that mean?
So paleo is obviously from the Paleolithic, old stuff, basically. But I'm not a paleontologist. So those are people who are, into all kinds of things that are, let's say, very, very old and fossilized, including dinosaurs. As a paleoanthropologist, I'm like a subset of that. And the anthropology is the kind of the giveaway. I'm interested in humans. So I'm interested in our story, the story of human evolution, why we do the things that we do from an evolutionary perspective. And for me personally, it's Neanderthals that are what I'm most interested in.
All primates, like humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, share a common ancestor, meaning we all evolved from a species that lived millions of years ago. And paleoanthropologists examine fossil records, artifacts like tools or weapons, and genetic data to understand how early humans, like the Neanderthals Ella specializes in, evolved from our shared ancestors and eventually led to the emergence of modern humans. Why should people care about prehistoric discoveries? Like, for things that happened so long ago, how does it really help us? Or is it just knowledge?
We are the byproduct of evolution, and most of that evolution did not happen in the modern era. The blueprint of our physiology, of our anatomy, of the way that we think, even of so many things about us, are a byproduct of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years before that, right? We didn't evolve for the here and now. At best, we evolved for a time when you would hang out in a cave. So many things that we find absolutely frustrating about us today. For example, you can think about our negativity bias. So many studies have been done on this where they basically show that you are always more likely to remember the negative than the positive, right? So if you lose $50, you are more likely to have a strong reaction to that than if you find $50, right? A lot of that blueprint made sense in the Paleolithic. It just doesn't make sense in the world of agriculture, which has only been around for 10,000 years, and it certainly doesn't make sense in the age of technology. We are not designed for this world that we have ironically created. And so I think it's really, really important for us to know about our background. Because just you go to a physician and they kind of take a history, this is what the field is.
As someone who studies ancient humans that lived hundreds of thousands of years ago, Ella often has to explain or even defend the relevancy of the science she's doing. But she points out that it's actually impossible to predict which branch of science will turn out to be truly relevant in the future.
20 years ago when I started, I remember one of my random community members was just what's the use of this? This seems like pointless knowledge. It's worth saying that some of the biggest discoveries, when you actually look at them, come from areas of science that nobody would have predicted. I would never in a million years go oh, this doesn't seem relevant to us and I just want to fund cancer stuff. If anything, we as the public and we as a scientific community should be saying look, you don't know where the next big discovery is going to come from. So we need to fund all aspects of science.
And this uncertainty about where the next big scientific discovery will come from becomes a driving force behind Ella's paleoanthropological research. One of the things that you are known for is not just paleoanthropology, but the geographies in which you focus on your paleoanthropology. You dig fossils in parts of the world that have experienced political conflict and sometimes war. Can you talk to us about how did that take shape?
Okay, so it kind of wasn't initially intentional.
It all started when Ella was an undergraduate studying human evolution. At the time, the accepted theory was that humans evolved as a species in Africa, and eventually we left Africa and migrated to other continents by way of the most obvious migration route.
Yeah, so basically they kept pointing to the Sinai of Egypt, which for those who aren't familiar is the bit of land that basically you can just walk it to get from Africa to Asia and the rest of the world.
The Sinai Peninsula, which is situated to the northeast of Egypt, serves as a land bridge between the African and Asian continents. But Ella noticed something else that wasn't taught in the curriculum at the time. Because her family is from Yemen, and she was really familiar with the geography of that country, her attention was drawn to another potential migration route out of Africa through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, located on the southern coast of Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula. Even though the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb is not a land bridge like the Sinai of Egypt, Ella believed that it was still a pretty compelling route for early humans to pursue.
It's a small bit of water, and it's just so close to East Africa. You know, water was much lower back then. So I just kept looking at the map and I was like, I don't think that humans didn't attempt this particular crossing.
So you were studying the migration of humans out of Africa, and all of the text was pointing towards Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula. But you were like looking at these maps and you were like, I understand Yemen quite well. This country and this passage might play a huge role. And then there's a but. But can we do paleo work there?
100%. And so I just thought, it's really worth doing some work out in Yemen. And what I did was, because I was quite inexperienced, shall we say, they don't really teach the practical side of paleoanthropology, like at university. That's kind of stuff you kind of do on the job training. And so I just started reaching out to just different paleo digs. But I especially focused on paleo digs that were in places that were complicated to work in, places that I would call hostile, disputed, or outright kind of unstable. Because it's not like the science is any different. It's a different level of understanding how to make the system work, and et cetera, et cetera.
To gain more experience working in unstable places that were difficult to navigate, Ella joined different research teams on their archeological digs. She participated in projects in Iraq and other disputed territories. And before she knew it, working in conflict zones kinda became her thing.
But like none of this was intentional. It's not like I woke up and was like, I want to specialize in hostile territories. It was more like, if I'm really interested in communicating the importance of a place like Yemen, then you're like, hold on a second, there's loads of places like this. In fact, this is like a huge portion of the map. Places that are unstable, hostile, disputed. And are we just going to not work there? Are we just going to ignore these places scientifically? That doesn't make sense. And so actually then it becomes like, all right, I guess that's actually what I specialize in.
So why are these places so important scientifically speaking?
It's what you call low-hanging fruit. If you're looking for scientific discoveries, you go to places where barely anyone's looking. And it's also kind of worth for me pointing out that we don't know where the next person who goes into the back of a cave and discovers a very particular microbe that, I don't know, digests plastic, right? We don't know if that person is going to come from Wales or from Wisconsin, or if they're actually going to come from Iraq or from the Congo, for example. There are probably other Einsteins out there who have just never been given the opportunity to be an Einstein.
And it's not simply that most people are more nervous about working in conflict zones. The barrier to the possibility of scientific discovery in these under-researched places is also institutional.
What a lot of people don't actually realize is that it is very, very difficult to get grants to work in these places. And by that, I mean that a lot of the grant-giving bodies and a lot of the universities just don't allow it. People are like, oh, but it's logical. And it's because, you might get kidnapped. And I'm like, look, I'm not saying everybody should do this. I want people to really think about it, to be trained. Just take it on a case-by-case basis. Say like, look, the bar might be higher, but it's not a blanket no. You just got to prove to us that you know what you're doing.
And when it comes to working in conflict zones, Ella definitely has a knack for it. As someone with family ties to Yemen and close connections to people whose lives have been shaped by revolutions, political imprisonments, and secret police, going to places experiencing political instability doesn't really faze her. And after spending years training to do science in different conflict zones, she was more than ready to pull off her own research project in her ancestral home, because Ella had big questions she really wanted to answer.
So I had 3 questions. One was, did humans use the route via Yemen to leave Africa? The second question was, did Neanderthals, who are primarily a kind of European Asian species, did they ever make it as far south as Yemen? And the third thing is, and people might not realize this, but we keep discovering new species of human. They just keep popping up, which is kind of just insane.
So what Ella's talking about here is that even though all primates share a common ancestor, At some point, they evolved from this common ancestor into different species. For example, Neanderthals evolved in Europe and Western Asia, while Homo sapiens, which are modern humans, evolved in Africa. But many other human species also existed across the globe. And Ella's right. Researchers keep finding new human species we didn't even know existed. For example, in 2003, a hobbit-like species was discovered in Indonesia. And in 2015, researchers in South Africa uncovered a small-brained species of human. The point is, human evolution is not linear. Multiple species of humans didn't just coexist. Sometimes they also interbred. And we'll likely continue to discover ancient species of humans.
And so I was like, well, is there a new species of human that is yet to be discovered that I could find in Yemen?
Ella assembled a multidisciplinary team to help her answer these big questions. But there was also an urgency to her mission, because in 2014, the political unrest in Yemen that had been brewing for years began to boil over.
As the war started, that kind of feeling of like, oh, this should be something I focus on just became more and more prevalent in my mind.
In September 2014, the Houthi rebels captured Yemen's capital city of Sana'a and declared themselves the new ruling power.
Things were not good, but I was still like, oh, I can still work there because the airport's still functional and the full-out war is not happening in the bit that I'm going to.
So while keeping a close watch on the situation on the ground, Ella continued planning the logistics for her research project. And in 2015, Ella and her team were finally ready to head off to the part of Yemen that was still accessible at the time. But things didn't go as expected.
Yemen kind of really started taking a turn for the worst. I think part of being trained is knowing when a place is just too unsafe. And there were definitely places which I possibly could have entertained at the time. But the problem is I couldn't entertain them with my team.
With the civil war escalating on the mainland, we'll find out how Ella and her team eventually managed to make their way to Yemen through a very unlikely route.
I was really devastated because of what was happening to my family and just the country as a whole. And I'd hear a story about this bit of the country being okay. And then I'd kind of look into it and I was like, maybe if I could do that. And I was just like, right, how do I make this work?
More on that after the break. I've been talking to my friend Ella Al-Shamahi, a paleoanthropologist and evolutionary biologist who focuses on working in unstable territories around the world. Ella was about to embark on a research project in her ancestral home of Yemen, but that opportunity was derailed by an intensifying civil war. In a very short amount of time, the fighting had spread to a considerable part of the country, and by March 2015, many airports in Yemen were either shut down or damaged due to the war.
And so I was like, it's just too risky. And just feeling like incredible guilt in the sense that it's like a weird kind of sense of guilt and gratitude, if that makes sense, right? Because you're just like, oh my God, that could have been me. My parents could have decided to have me be born in Yemen and I would currently be trying to be a refugee. Like, it's mind-boggling. And because it was happening at the same time as Syria, I mean, the general public was so depressed by the stories coming out of Syria that nobody had any headspace for stories about Yemen. So Yemen was being ignored. And it was devastating because at the time the UN was saying it was like the worst man-made humanitarian disaster on the planet. And it was just like, wow, nobody's talking about this. And so in my mind, I was like, if I can do an expedition there, I wasn't just seeing it as like research. I was seeing it as PR. And I was just like, right, how do I make this work? And I just sat there for 2 years just looking at a map. The thing that I kept hearing was that the island of Socotra was safe once you got there. And the island of Socotra is actually a few islands that are between Yemen and Somalia. So they're not exactly like the safest and the easiest to get insurance for, let's say. And I was like, okay, it's once you get there, it's safe. The problem is getting there.
Even though at the time Socotra was still unaffected by the war on the mainland, getting to the island was a huge logistical problem.
One route was via a flight you would get a flight, I think it was from Egypt, to this really small city in Yemen. And then you took the flight from that city to Socotra. The problem is that city is an Al-Qaeda stronghold. So we were hearing quite a few reports that over the last year or two, regularly the connecting flight would get cancelled. So I was like, I'm going to be stuck with a bunch of white people that I have to protect. They're my responsibility in the middle of this place where they could get kidnapped. No, that's not a good idea. The other option was a cement cargo ship, which was insane.
Tell me all about it. I imagine you've never been on a cement cargo ship ever again.
I don't know if I ever will again. I'm not going to lie. So it was a cement cargo ship where it was not fit for purpose. It had no safety, anything on that ship. Like there was nothing. They didn't have life vests as far as I remember on that. There were no like beds or anything like that. I mean, that's the least of our concerns. There was no toilet really. I mean, there was like a basket that was literally like hooked onto the side of the ship. And when I say toilet, what I really mean, it's like a basket with a hole in it. So you just kind of like, you walk up to it and you squat. And because I'm really tall, there was no way I was going to do this without everybody being able to see it. So I was like, oh my God, this is going to be like horrific. And we were having to look at like pirate reportings and all this stuff. Like it was quite intense. But I was like, look, this is the only way we can get there. And the risk is localized to these few days while we're on the water. But what I love about this is like, I have fear of things that don't necessarily make sense. So, for example, I am incredibly chill around guns, but I don't like heights. But obviously, I've picked to work in caves and mountains, so I just have to deal with it, basically. But the other thing that I didn't know I had a fear of was cockroaches. Don't get me wrong, I'm all right with like 1 or 2 cockroaches, but that kind of an infestation where you're sleeping and they're like, you're flipping them off you, and it was like I describe it as at one point below deck, the floor was black and it would just be moving. And it was because it wasn't actually black. It was just that there were so many cockroaches down there.
No.
And I was like, oh no. There was like a moment where I was like, should I send the rest of the team via the ship and I just go via the terrorist stronghold? Like, I didn't even know I had a fear of a swarm of cockroaches.
Okay, so the hell that was this ship, was there, like, I'm imagining there's this beautiful moment where you're like approaching the island and there's like, do you remember the moment that you first saw the island or stepped onto it?
It was really emotional because I hadn't been to Yemen at that point. So it was incredibly emotional. And I was getting some really sad messages from some of my cousins that were in Yemen about how awful what they were going through was. So I was just like, not in a good place, should we say. I was just like, oh, I can't believe I've got to go to Yemen. It's not the mainland. It's not the city that my dad comes from. It's not the city my mum comes from, but it's still Yemen.
And not only was Socotra one of the few places in Yemen at the time that wasn't engulfed in the war unfolding on the mainland, this island, which is slightly smaller than the state of Rhode Island, is home to an incredibly unique ecosystem.
Somebody described it to me once as like the most alien-looking place on Earth. So it has like these incredible canyons, and then it has these like beaches that have sand dunes on them, which is remarkable. And then so many of the plants there, the animals there are endemic, so they exist there and only there. And so you get these trees called the dragon's blood tree. Now, the dragon's blood tree is a very ancient tree, and very few of the species of that tree remain in the world.
The dragon's blood tree of Socotra, with its spiky, umbrella-shaped canopy and striking red sap, looks like something straight out of a fantasy world, just like the rest of the island. And because Socotra is a biodiversity hotspot with a unique ecosystem, it's no wonder that it's been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
I mean, it's gorgeous. It's really, really beautiful. It was definitely worth it.
Gosh.
Yeah. In fact, if you correct for size, it has more endemic species than even the Galapagos. So it's,
Goodness gracious.
It's quite incredible.
Like, I mean, it seems like the journey was like...
I know, the journey was enough.
Then you had to execute a plan. Yeah. Once you got there, you had to like do your scouting trip. What was your plan
So the plan was to look at some of the caves and get a sense of if any of them might be Paleolithic caves. And it was particularly interesting in Socotra because historically, Rae, people have lived in caves in Socotra. And it was interesting because I turned up and everyone was like, oh, no, Ella, nobody still lives in caves. And I was like, I've heard that they still do. And we asked around enough and one guy went, actually, there is this one area. And we traveled for quite a while to get there. And these people basically lived in front of their historical caves. So like, it's best to describe it as like a tiny, tiny village, more like a hamlet in the middle of the mountain. And mostly these people were either born or one member of the family was born in that cave. They were kind of raised in the cave. They had like these huts in front of the cave. And then when the weather gets rough, which is quite frequent in Yemen because they get hit by monsoons, they then went back into the caves that they were born in because actually the cave is much better protection from the elements than the hut is. And for me as a paleoanthropologist, those caves are particularly interesting because if I want to identify a cave where people lived back in the Paleolithic, if it's of interest to people today or was of interest to people like 50 years or 100 years ago, there must have been something about that cave that made it habitable, right?
And this was a scouting expedition, so you weren't properly like engaged in the research, but did you find any fossils?
No. So, I mean, every so often there is like one academic who finds a fossil on a scout and we all hate them. Most of us are not that lucky.
No, you're just like, you're looking at the potential of this place.
Exactly right. No, so we didn't find any fossils. What we did find though was a bunch of caves. And I think based on that, it became very clear where prospecting should happen. The other side of it was we wanted to have not just to be doing science, but we also wanted to put out some positive stories about Yemen that would get Yemen some attention. So we wanted to get some amazing photography out of it. And, you know, we did well out of that expedition. It certainly was more fruitful than any other scouting expedition I've ever done, for sure. And, you know, we put out a bunch of incredible pictures in so many publications. And, you know, I think it's a very easy sell to media outlets because we basically just produced the most incredible imagery of the most incredible place on earth, which, you know, barely anyone had heard of or seen of. And it happened to be a conflict zone.
So you did this scouting. It was tremendous. You faced your biggest inner fears even to get there. You were able to get these articles out that showed the world a bit of Yemen. Have you been able to go back for the proper expedition?
So no, we haven't gone back. A number of issues happened, including COVID, which really didn't help.
That's a huge bump in the road.
Yeah, massive bump. A lot of our political contacts had also left the island because of the war. So that was hard. And so basically that is on hold right now. We'll go back to Socotra when we can get it right.
You know, I bring that up because it can be hard. I mean, even without the public eye, it's hard to have setbacks or difficulties or bumps in the road. I'm curious, like, how have you dealt with it? I
mean, that one was tough. Parts of that were part of the game. Do you know what I mean? I know what it's like working in unstable territories and you got to let it calm down and then you come back to it and, you know, you have a lot of just long-term projects.
Since the Socotra project is currently on hold indefinitely, Ella decided to turn her focus to other projects. In recent years, she's been busy conducting research in other under-researched places, like Somaliland. She's also launched a second career as a television host. From a show that investigates the lifestyle of Neanderthals to a series that explores the discovery of female Viking warriors, Ella, both as a television host and a scientist, is always eager to explore subjects from a fresh perspective.
And I think the television shows I do, I'm especially excited about topics where we get to like overturn the perception. So like whether it's about Vikings or about the Amazon, where we kind of went in and kind of tried to overturn a stereotype. And those are the ones that really kind of often the most exciting.
You bring so much of yourself to the public in the spirit of science and adventure and exploration. And I also very much see and appreciate that the bigger picture of your work, whether it's like the research you do or the show that you present, you're working to eliminate this blind spot of Western science, which is so important. And you're also shedding light on subjects and peoples and places in the world that are misunderstood or sometimes just dismissed and invisible. And I'm curious, like, would you agree that kind of like a big picture in your work is to offer people a shift in perspective?
Yeah, 100%. That's a huge, huge part of it. I think for me, I could have very easily just continued being a creationist if I hadn't have gone and looked at it and thought about it. And I think for me, it's like, well, I want to be able to present knowledge and just bring people in. Science belongs to all of us, like all of us. When I say that, I'm definitely talking about gender and ethnicity, but I am actually also talking about political belief and religious beliefs, because I'm like, I don't have to agree with you. I might not like your political beliefs. I might not like this, that, and the other about you, but we got to be able to agree on some of the foundational science. You know, at the end of the day, I want us to not see science as political, to not see science as like an agnostic or atheist endeavor.
And as much as Ella wants science to be accessible to everyone, regardless of their identity, politics, or religion, she also envisions a world where conflict zones aren't just seen as war-torn landscapes, but as places where life continues and discoveries are possible. You do this work in parts of the world that have experienced political conflict, and there are many that the media are attentive to right now, right? Like we have Gaza, we have Sudan, we have Ukraine, we have Democratic Republic of Congo, and that's just a few that the American media, at least, is kind of giving attention to. But I'm curious, do you have kind of like a big picture articulation for like what shift in perspective you're hoping people can get from the work that you do about conflict zones or unstable regions in general?
I think in terms of attitudes to conflict zones, I think what I would love is for it to just be absolutely culturally acceptable for people to work in hostile territory, places that are unstable, hostile, disputed, because I've never seen people quite so proud as when it's a place that's completely forgotten. Everybody only hears negative stories about that place. And then they get, they have a write-up in a magazine. And sometimes it's just a YouTuber turns up and it's just like, wow, you have this incredible bit of biodiversity or these incredible this or that. And they're so proud because the only stories that they hear about themselves and about their country, they're always negative. So I will say, and I will always say, that it's a tragedy for science if we're not working in these places. And it's a tragedy for the people that come from these places if they don't know that they could be doing incredible research because we've basically excluded those places scientifically in the international community.
God, you are such a good communicator.
Bless you. I might have given these answers before. Thank you so much, Rae. I really, really appreciate this.
Thank you. I love you. So you're welcome.
I love you too, babe.
Ella's new series with BBC and PBS is called Human. It's a 5-part series that explores our journey as a species, and it'll be out in the US on PBS in fall 2025. Thanks for listening to Going Wild. If you enjoyed the show and want to support us, please follow Going Wild on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. It really helps. This episode was hosted by me, Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant. Written and produced by Caroline Hadelaksono. Sound design and engineering by Carriot Harmon and Jason Sheasley. Our managing editor is Priscilla Alabi. Going Wild is produced by Great Feeling Studios and the WNET Group. Jacob Lewis is our executive producer. Danielle Broza is digital lead for Nature, and Fred Kaufman is executive producer for Nature. Artwork by Ariana Bowlers and Karen Brazel. Special thanks to Amanda Schmidt, Blanche Robertson, Jane Lisi, Chelsea Satkamp, and Karen Ho. Going Wild is a podcast from PBS Nature, made possible by viewers like you. Watch new episodes of Nature Wednesdays at 8/7 Central on PBS, at pbs.org/nature, and on the PBS Video app. Funding is provided by Anne and Russell Fernald. Stay connected with PBS Nature on social media and sign up for their newsletter. Link in the show notes. You can also follow me, Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant, and PBS Nature on social media. Find guest details in each episode's show notes.
guys, hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was really, really interesting. I got a couple of different episodes to choose from. It was really hard to make that decision there, but I just think Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant, she's very, very cool, and so is the guest, and so is the whole story. So hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, and you want to hear the rest of the brand new season, go over and follow that on your favorite podcast platform, Going Wild with Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant, wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Max Hartshorn, host of the Go Nomad Travel Podcast. Every week, I bring you a short 5 to 8 minute escape to somewhere unexpected. I cover the kinds of travel stories you don't hear anywhere else, quirky destinations, unusual adventures, and people who make the world endlessly interesting. If you love discovering new places but don't have time for a long show, these bite-sized episodes are perfect for your commute, your walk, or your coffee break. Join me on the Go Nomad Travel Podcast and explore the world in just a couple of minutes.
If you want to travel more, ideally in luxury, but without the luxury price tag, this show is for you. I'm DeAndre Koch, and on Revolutionizing Your Journey, I use my unique vantage point as a financial advisor to break down exactly how my wife and I leverage credit card points and miles to fly business class, stay at 5-star resorts, and take bucket list trips for a fraction of the cost. Each week, I share real strategies packed with actionable tips and interview some of the smartest travelers in the game to help you revolutionize the way you travel. Travel well, live boldly, and find Revolutionizing Your Journey wherever you get your podcasts.